All right, welcome to our next podcast. I know last week Naveen was out with his move, but he's back this week, so here we go. We're going to talk today about cyber attacks. I think we know ransomware is happening a lot, but, there's a little bit of a history of what ransomware has been doing and kind of where it's going. And Naveen and I were both recently discussing that there's this thesis of where it could go from an attack pattern. So why don't I turn it over to Naveen? What do you think is going to happen in the world of ransomware?
Oh, man. So first of all, I think historically, and even currently, we still think of ransomware attack as being like one thing. It's like, oh, someone's going to come in and, encrypt all of your files, and then they're going to leave you a little note that says, by the way, to get your data back, send Bitcoin to so and such in place, right? And that worked because, well, for a while, people were clueless and, I don't know how many people actually paid the Bitcoin, but supposedly enough that the people kept doing this. But after a while, you can kind of say, okay, well, I know exactly what that attack is like and can start to protect against it and so on. At the end of the day, when we say ransomware attack, I think all an attacker really needs to do is somehow immobilize your business. Encryption is just like one way to do that.
Yeah, I agree with that. And, if we take a look, there was that period I would say it's probably a few years old now, where that was the common attack pattern.
Yep.
I think last year it was mostly not people doing that. It was compromised credentials getting sold on the dark web, like the big snowflake attack, right?
Exfiltrating is now, I think, probably the in vogue thing, right? I'm not going to lock down your data. I'm just going to take all your data and I'm going to threaten to release it.
Yeah.
Unless you pay me. Right?
Yeah. So I think that's there. But most of the time, like, we always think of, like, those old movies where some hackers like hacking something with a terminal screen that, like, no one in tech actually knows what it's doing. Right. We have this, like, I think what Sandra Bullock in The Net, old movie reference, right? View of hacking. But most of the time, I think it's not that sophisticated. Most of the time, I think it's just like a phishing email. Someone tells you to reset your password, and now they own your password.
Exactly. I mean, that's really what a security breach is at the end of the day, right? I think, I do think people envision, I don't know, these like mysterious things happen on the wire. And like, actually, even as a systems guy, when I was in, grad school learning about computers or whatever, that's actually what I thought people did. I was like, wow, they like understand what the process is doing and they know what part of memory to go and touch. That's not what they do at all.
I think we met a company this week that was trying to protect against that. Right?
And so it's like, no, what they do is like, oh, we all get 100 text messages a day. And some of them are things like your automated bill payment for rent is not going to go through. Like, click this to fix it.
Click
right?
now.
Right?
Create urgency.
And it's all just clickbaiting, right? And once you can do that, you can capture credentials, whatever. And we all make mistakes.
Yeah, and I think there used to be a world where people used to download free software off the internet too.
Oh, that's true too.
Right.
Yeah.
So, like, I think when I was, I would try free software off the internet.
That's still a thing. My niece was into The Sims, and there's also and like Roblox. All these things have the same problem, right? Where so in the gaming world, this is still a thing, where you want to get all these mods. You're like, oh, I want to get the Pokemon mod for Sims. I don't know if that's the thing. But some random person will have created it, it's popular, but then you install it, it runs at your computer, and man, you just got owned.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that's still a thing.
So, it's interesting, but, there's been a ton of companies around trying to solve these problems, right? Pure has stuff for anomaly detection. CrowdStrike does, Tenable, Snyk. There's a ton of companies that are security companies.
Yeah.
Even the backup companies are branding themselves security companies for detection because it's cool, right? But I think I'm becoming fairly jaded around all of these detection companies, mainly because of everything generates garbage.
Yep.
They're like, we will detect your ransomware, but we will also tell you that everything that isn't ransomware is ransomware, thus inundating you with a bunch of garbage.
Yeah.
Right? You agree with that?
Yeah, totally. Because, I mean, what is it? Okay, we talked about the example of, let's say, just exfiltrating data. Good luck detecting that. So, there's certain signatures to it, which will be like, oh, you just read the whole table. Well, sometimes you're actually on purpose reading.
That's what a backup job is.
Exactly. Right. And so, there's signatures, but some of those signatures are going to look like normal behavior, right?
Yeah. Well, and I think, more sophisticated attack patterns on, exfiltration, make it look like normal behavior.
Yeah.
Right.
And actually, when it comes to like clickbaiting too, it's like, well, you know who the whole other part of our industry that loves to use clickbait? It's called marketing.
Yeah.
And so like it's a total, what's bad? Is this phishing or is this just an advertisement? Like, I mean, it's hard to tell, right?
It is really hard to tell nowadays. I do think though, like we used to think of denial of service as like, oh, there's a ton of things that are going to overload the server and then it's going to crash.
Yeah.
Right. I actually think there's a concept right now, and I think this is where the industry is going, is called psychological denial of service. And the way it works is this, and I can use Okta as the perfect example, or MFA, right? We all believe MFA is good.
Yep.
But if we overdo it, like every time I log in, I have to two-factor, right? I'm probably doing, 200 two-factor authentications a day.
Yeah.
So if I'm doing 200 a day and I just take an 8-hour work day and I divide it up in terms of how many MFAs I'm doing in a minute, right? Or 5 minutes. In a 5-minute window, if I'm doing a ton of MFAs because I'm logging into so many different things, then isn't it just easy for someone to ask for approval and slip into the MFA workstream? Because if the noise is so high,
Yep.
right? And those, like, I might have a high volume of legitimate signals,
Yep.
right? That I'm just like, approve. I'm not even reading my MFA approvals of like, why is it coming from Russia as a, thing.
Yeah. So actually, Okta had to create a feature for this. So if you probably remember, so Pure actually uses Okta, and we turned on MFA, and we did it without using this other feature called like Okta Verify or something like that. And what it meant was every time you went to some application on your browser or your phone, it would just constantly just hit you with MFAs. And so everyone got to the point where you like open a browser, it's like, oh, MFA. It's like, oh, you need to send an email, MFA, right? And you're doing it 200 times a day. And I know personally, I was like, oh my God, I'm totally going to be phished because I have no idea if I created these anymore or not.
Yeah.
I'm just getting them all the time. And so they had to create a feature so that you just don't, stop getting MFAs. You need to get one every so often. Otherwise, you're not going to pay attention.
Yeah. And so I actually think that, okay, MFA is one attack vector there, but assume, like, I know this, that most security incident teams, they're like, oh, like this is the, my view of every CISO. They're like, we're going to get a scanner. We're going to implement scanners and we're going to look at everything in logs. And then they're going to inundate your engineering teams with a ton of noise.
Yeah.
And then engineering teams are going to build like, people that have to either look at that to connect it to PagerDuty, or like if they, God forbid, they don't filter it out and connect it to PagerDuty, they're going to have all their engineers quit.
Yeah.
Because they're going to spam them with PagerDuty.
Yep.
Or, that team is going to like, okay, let's go figure out what signal to noise. And you're constantly chasing noise and you're building things to eliminate noise.
Yes.
So if that's the way the world works, which I think it is,
Yeah,
I think, there's multiple things sending signals in and whatever, then how do you deal with that? Because, I think the same problem will exist from a psychological attack. Ransomware people can just constantly be like, oh, well, there's enough noise. What if I just increase noise level, increase noise level, increase noise level? No one in security is actually solving that problem. They're just amplifying the problem.
100%. If there was a company I could work for where my job, I got paid to create noise of, security attacks, I would go do that because it'd be really easy right now. You just basically, you could use some of the vibe coding stuff online to be like, hey, tell me how CrowdStrike detects a incident on your network. I'm like, how do I make more of those events happen or whatever, right? And you could easily just create
That's a replay machine.
Exactly. Just make things that are creating noise to cover up the real attacks, right?
Yeah.
Or just overwhelm people so they're not paying attention to the real attacks.
Yeah.
I think we're kind of screwed. Like I don't really know how you get out of this mess. It's an escalation game. I really don't. I don't see someone being able to build a perfect signal to noise.
Okay, so let's see if we can solve this problem. If you're a parent, and we're talking about psychological signal to noise.
Sure.
If you wanted to overwhelm your child from a psychological signal to noise standpoint, what would you do?
Like, I mean, first of all, I would just constantly try to get their attention. I would try, like, or give them lots of things that they need to be doing, blah, blah, blah. Just make everything seem like it's ultra important and it has to happen now, right? Like, I mean, 'cause as a parent, I feel like the only signal I have to my child is being super judicious about the time I want them to have my attention. And so I would just basically be like, get their attention all the time.
Well, look, it's a perfect use case because kids generally have short attention spans, right? Like you build attention span as you grow older, right? And you're able to slow down a little bit. I think that's age. But like generally most kids have shorter attention spans.
Yeah.
So, either they'll end up ignoring you or you ask less.
Yeah.
Right? But let's flip the equation. What could because you have a longer attention span and more attention to detail, knowing who you are, how would your kid perform psychological denial of service on you?
Well, they already do that. That's trivial. I think actually maybe I'm just describing how you do it to me, which is I need to focus and think about something, and someone constantly distracting me with, "Hey, come look at this. Hey, Dad, watch. Hey, Dad, watch. Hey, Dad, watch. Check this out. Check this out." That would, I'm going to eventually lose my mind.
But how do you engage? Because you have to do that. As a parent, you have to engage.
I do. And so I'm like, I say, this is not the time for that. I basically create, times where it's okay for that. And then otherwise, I'm going to ignore everything that you say.
Okay. So is that applicable in the work pattern where you're like, okay, I'm just going to like batch all of these things and look at it at a particular time, or is that not applicable in the work setting?
Yeah, I think that the problem with, so I think all what we're trying to do here is like sort of manage, here's a bunch of signal that I'm getting from my child in this case, and I'm going to ignore it during certain times, and I'm going to allow it during other times, right?
But what if in those times, like, he skins his knee and he's hurting, right? Like, you know what I mean? Like, that's the problem. This is you're trying to figure out a signal, like hey, this is not the time for it. It's like, oh, I fell off the swing and broke something.
Yeah.
Right? So, but it's not the time.
Yeah, that's
right.
True.
This is the signal to noise problem.
That is true. Yeah. I don't know. Do you have thoughts on how to address that?
So it's interesting because I have a daughter and a son, and my son is very good at hey, look at this. He's like high stream of consciousness activity.
That's my daughter.
Right. And my daughter is not. My daughter's like only comes to me when something's signal. Like she's like, I need something right now.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I have to treat both of those things differently, right? In the like the high signal world, I appreciate it because it's low tax. Like for me, it's a low tax because she said something, I'm reacting, we're engaging in a high value transaction, right? In the sun world of like signal to noise, I have to parallel process, right? Like I have to like active mind, subconscious mind, like, and this is like the psychology of habitualization is interesting because your brain chemistry works this way, right? Like if you go on vacation, you normalize yourself, like the first 3 days in Hawaii are awesome. Right. By day 7, the water doesn't look blue anymore because you're like, this is what I expect.
Yeah.
That's why there's a trailing off period in euphoria and oxytocin in your brain after the first few days of vacation because you've normalized to paradise, right? It's not signal anymore. So the only way to make it signal is create variance, right? The way the brain detects signal, and the brain is great at detecting signal to noise, but it's defining it as variance.
Interesting.
Right? So the attack pattern, the human attack pattern is like, okay, if you're normalized to look at this, look at this, look at this, look at this,
you'll tune in.
You know it's noise.
Yeah.
And if they skin their knee, that's like your brain subconsciously will detect that that's high variance.
Interesting.
Right? So for your child to actually attack you from a psychological denial of service,
it has to be random.
There needs to be false signal. Like, oh, I skinned my knee. Nah, just joking. You know what I mean? Like, and then like, but the variability that increases it needs to train your brain that that's all noise.
Right.
So when the signal happens, he knows you won't engage. That's how he would do it.
Interesting.
Right? So transferring that to tech, for the criminals out there, right? Like this is the public service announcement. I actually think this is what like modern day criminals can do with psychological
create things that look like attacks, but they're not.
But they're not.
And then one of them is real.
Because you're creating, like, for me, I know I would be subject to this because I know how the brain chemistry works. I would be subject to be like, okay, that's not fun. Whatever, right?
Yep.
If, like, that's normal.
That's normal, yeah.
And it was funny. Our company tried a phishing, like, we do phishing simulations, right?
I got caught by one recently. Dang, I've been getting so good at them.
So they sent this other one saying there was some, like, I don't know, something near a corporate building safety check-in, right? I don't know if you got that
Yeah, I
email.
saw that one, yeah.
And so I was like, this sounds like phishing.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not going to check in, right? Turns out it was a real thing, right? Like, I'm so jaded now that, like, you know, I'm treating everything. I think Michelle's like, fill out a survey so you can do a DX check-in. And I'm like, why is she asking for my date of birth for, like, you know, DX swag? So I sent a note to Michelle. I'm like,
is this you?
Is this you? Right? So I think to some degree, I'm probably on the more paranoid side of it.
I'm normally pretty paranoid too.
Right? On this kind
but
of...
I got caught. So, like, that's the whole problem here, right? So the one I got caught on recently is, you know, we have to submit our expense reports by like a certain time. And then it said something like, oh, it's like there was an error in your report or whatever. I was like, oh man, I need to go fix that. And it's like, surprise, you got caught by a simulated phishing attack. I was like, oh, son of a...
They get you, like, again, it's a psychological thing, right? And there's phishing, but I think that's now. Yeah. I think it's going to change to psychological denial of service. Like, eventually, we're all going to be, like, so good at, like, we zero trust everything. So you have to condition the noise level to be like, just increase noise, increase noise, increase noise. And I think you said something interesting, right? You said, hey, you don't think AI is going to help in defense?
No, I don't at all. So, like, for example, so let's say we are trying to deal with this, right? And you wanted to build, I think a lot of people, ourselves included, think that LLMs are pretty cool and you can do all sorts of things. I don't think it helps at all with classification or filtering or any of this stuff. So you would try and say, like, oh, you know, these are good emails, these are bad emails. Like, someone's going to be able to exploit that eventually. What I think it's great at is being the adversary. So
yeah, I think it's an offensive tool. It's
an
great at generating spam.
So I can easily go be like, hey, create, here's an example of real PG&E bills, right? Yeah. Emails that are sent out. Create a spam version of this that, you know, embeds a link to my, you know, hijack page and all that stuff. Like, you could create that stuff trivially. Yeah. And then be like, by the way, what services are available to send out mass, and by the way, you just communicate with the LLM as if you're doing marketing. Yeah. Like, because if you said that, oh, I'm trying to create a phishing attack, I'm like, well, I'm not supposed to help you.
Yeah, there's guardrails to prevent using it. So,
but if you went and said, like, I'm trying to do a mass market email campaign.
100%. So as cyber criminals, public service announcement, you know, just say you're a marketer and then your criminal activity is okay.
Yeah, and now the whole GPT LLM world is open to you. It's like your new best friend.
Yeah, no, but the other, you know, side of that, right, is the reason why I don't think, you know, I tend to concur that it won't help you on defense, is you have to break down how LLMs work. They're trained on statistical samples of things that happen, right? So you can infiltrate the training data to make everything look normal. That's fairly easy to do. That's pretty trivial. 2, like, these attacks are happening anyway, so they're in your training bases. Exactly. Right? So, like, the nature of using it defensively is kind of silly.
Yeah, agreed. And also the nature of these LLMs is that they are language-based at the end of the day, right? Like, they're more I don't know, I think of them as being almost more like reasoning-based. And what we're talking about is signal to noise. Like, LLMs are not really good at discrete math. Like, that's kind of what this is, right? And so I just don't think it's the right tool. There are older tools, right? So like, what everyone used to call AI was neural nets and classifiers, and like those, if they're really well trained, I think maybe could help with this problem. Yeah. But I think it's just a moving target because, like you said, you could then just increase noise. Yeah. And break that as well.
Yeah. No. Look, if someone came to me as a security vendor trying to sell me their thing, and their monetization scheme from a pricing is they'll pay me $100, right? Or I will pay them $1 million for every signal. and they will pay me 10 cents for all the noise they sent. I would buy that product.
Interesting.
Right?
Yeah.
Because you're setting up an incentive system to actually solve a hard problem.
Yep.
Like that product is worth something.
Yeah.
I would argue that right now, public service announcement to every CISO, none of your security products are helping you at all.
Yeah.
I don't think any of them are. All this detection stuff, don't you shouldn't sleep well at night if you think this is helping you because of psychological denial of service attacks.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, I would love to know if one does exist that someone can show me.
Respond to this podcast if you know an answer.
Exactly, because I think it is one of those things where it helps you. What's the saying? It's like you always look for your keys where the lights are. It's like, well, I'm just going to turn the lights on everywhere. But the problem is that it is just giving you so many false signals that I don't know. What do you do with all that information?
Yeah. Well, so I'm going to go back to, did some studying in music. I think there's an analogy that does exist that kind of changes the problem perspective here. So in audio engineering, if you study electroacoustic music, there's the concept of noise reduction technology. And I was around before it existed, and I remember the advent of it. So I learned this in signal class. So in the audio engineering space, there's been a ton of study around signal to noise. That's how the noise cancellation happened. If you took DSP, digital signal processing, in college, there was a lot of algorithms on how do you reduce noise in signal processing.
Yeah.
But one of the biggest things that moved the industry forward in signal to noise was this, and I don't even know who invented this, but it was a brilliant idea for noise canceling technology. You used to send an audio signal from point A to point B on a single cable, sine wave. So when they did a pro cable, right, for noise canceling cables, right, you're traveling, let's say it's traveling 100 feet, the cable picks up noise. And for the longest time, they're like, let's add more shielding. Let's make the cable thicker. Let's avoid interference. Everything became about the shielding of the signal, right? And you're trying to shield against noise. You're like, I can't pick up noise. I'm trying to filter out noise.
Right.
And then the leapfrog in the technology was like, let's not do that anymore. Let's get rid of all the shielding, right? Let's do super thin cables, and let's add a second wire. And in the second wire, let's add a little chip at the beginning that does a 90-degree sine wave offset on the signal. Send the signal through. Send the same signal on a second wire with a 90-degree offset through. The cable's picking up interference on both of those cables. When you get to the end, have a little chip on the cable that offsets the second signal 90 degrees. When you offset it, the two sine waves cancel each other to zero. Anything else you've picked up is noise. And then for the last millimeter, send the original signal through, and you've eliminated all noise. That is the reason our noise canceling technology is so good right now.
Interesting.
We've solved signal to noise in audio engineering.
Just by small delays, doing and doing the canceling.
But I think the technology there is don't worry about the noise.
Worry about the signal.
Worry about the signal. Think about what's clean.
Yeah.
Identify clean, don't identify dirty.
Yeah.
If you think about antivirus, it's I'm going to look for dirty stuff.
Right.
Right? If you think about all of the malware detection, ransomware detection, this is a ransomware signature. This is a ransomware heuristic. So even storage, this is a signature that creates, this I/O pattern that I'm going to try to detect on a drive. But polymorphic signature verification or psychological denial of service easily overcomes all of those things, right, from attack pattern. So how would you apply that audio engineering concept to the signal to noise in enterprise data and enterprise tech?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a good suggestion. I think there's some challenges, but so I think essentially what you're saying is, okay, let's measure what's normal, right? And deviation from normal is the noise. So I think for a bunch of things, I think that could work, right? Okay, I'm trying to think of a good example, but you train on the if you're running a application and you want to worry about a ransomware attack, okay, well, what does that application normally do? What processes are running? What's supposed to be there? What should it be touching? Those are all, during the normal mode of operation, are good. So you would have to kind of know that there's a time where it's good. You'd measure it. And then anything outside of that would be a deviation, right? And you'd say, that's not normal. We didn't expect that change. I wonder, though, that's kind of what, to some extent, anomaly detection is trying to do. But I guess the key difference is anomaly detection is trying to say, here's kind of normal and here's something that changed.
Yeah, the question is, if your normal is not like, the question is, what's the definition of normal?
Yeah.
Right? How do you define a clean signature?
That's the challenge.
And today, the definition of clean signature is, I've been looking at heuristics, I've been looking at operations, I've been looking at all these things, right? But all of that approximates clean.
Correct.
Right? It approximates normal. And a slow psychological denial of service can still get you because you can change what's normal over time without introducing ransomware.
Right.
You could just like put this in and increase the CPU utilization 0.00005% every minute or every day. So it will create a new baseline of normal from a denial of service attack where you can just ruin the CPU in a year.
Yeah.
It's a time-bound, slow psychological denial of service attack.
Yep.
Right? So heuristics won't help you with that.
Yeah.
Right? And you really need to start with 100% definition of clean. Right? That's where anomaly detection today fails.
Yeah, but how do you define clean? I mean, that's a challenging problem. So I'm even just thinking of it from the perspective of what is if I'm building a piece of software and it's supposed to do its job, like how do I define what it's supposed to be doing? Right?
Well, and I think this is where you have to break down the problem set. So like, let's, just take a application with a simple architecture, storage, compute, network, database application, right? Yeah. Like it's a fairly monolithic, simple application, right? For a second.
Sure.
You have to think about this at every layer, right? You have to break down the problem. In some layers, you may be able to do clean, some layers you may not. For example, we have a service for healthcare imaging in Evergreen One.
Yeah.
We know that the things that are stored on the storage are medical images, only medical images. In every medical image on a file system has a format. This is an X-ray, this is a CT scan. The vendors that write those things only write the file integrity format in a certain format. We have a scanner that opens it up to identify the format.
Yeah.
We know the integrity of that format because from the application vendor that wrote software to write that object, we have a very clean definition of what is an X-ray.
Right.
And as we look into that, if we can't identify that as an X-ray, we know something happened to that. It's corrupted. That's a corrupted thing. And if we maintained version history, we can flag what the last known good clean version is.
Yeah.
So we can guarantee storage level integrity at 100%, right? Like we can absolutely say this is clean and this is the last known good copy, and you could do it synchronously, asynchronously, stage it, like on box, off box. There's a ton of things you could do to minimize overhead.
Yeah.
Right? That's just a technology architecture problem. But what about the application? Right? Let's say the attack pattern is, I'm going to corrupt their data and give Naveen, because he's Indian, my badge to go in and take my X-ray and just corrupt their data by, they think they have an X-ray of me, but it's actually of you.
Yep.
Right? A lot of that's personnel security. It's like when you're walking to the X-ray, they're like, what's your date of birth? What street do you live on? Whatever. Like their security is just like asking you questions I could tell you. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So we could very easily corrupt the application data.
Yes.
Right? So I can't guarantee at my place in the world clean application data. I can guarantee clean data from a storage attack vector.
Yeah.
But I think then you have to look at it at the compute, then you have to look at it at the network, then you have to look at it at the application. Like you have to look at every layer for verification.
I think that, so this is kind of the security through verification approach, I guess. And so it's almost like TSA, like it kind of reminds me of a little bit of like boarding a plane. But I worry that
the overhead too high?
The overhead could get high, right? And then also, even if you talk about the file format thing, right? A sophisticated attacker would eventually learn, oh, these guys are just looking that as long as the format's correct, I'm going to go corrupt the part that they don't really understand, which is the image portion, right? And I'm going to.
But the image is, we're not looking at the metadata of the file. We're opening up the file.
Oh, I see.
And understanding how the file is expected to be written, right? So it's 100%. Like I can guarantee clean verification
integrity.
That this is an X-ray by this company.
Yeah.
Right? And it's interesting, some of the consumer electronic spaces kind of had to do this with HDMI eARC, right? When you plug in your HDMI cable, it's like your receiver learns your TV learns your receiver, they know what model number they are. There's a specification and understanding in the eARC format of consumer-to-consumer device communication, right? It just knows what it is.
Yeah.
And if it can't detect it, it's like, oh, I don't know that thing, right? So you might have gotten a black market Samsung TV if you're not like verified. It's like MAC addresses for hardware. You know what I mean? You're like, this is the thing that should be communicating with me.
And actually, so to be honest, that's the one part of security that I do believe works. So I think what you're at a high level, you're describing, you could say there's a form of this which is signatures, right?
Huh.
So I do think that we have learned that the one thing that does work is cryptographic signing. It's like, okay, hey, can I sign that I'm the one who created this file, and only files created by Naveen am I going to trust, right? Mm-hmm. That actually is a path that could potentially work, right?
Yeah.
Where it's like, oh, okay, well, the ransomware thing can't create files that look like files I made, right? And actually emails, by the way, there was a point in time where everybody wanted people to use signed emails.
I remember that. I had to do you sign this?
And that failed miserably. But
Why?
If that were to, because I don't think we ever found a way to make it really easy to maintain your own public key and all that stuff. Because it just
key management.
People understand there's usually like a public key that you would share with everyone. So I would maintain the private key. Every time I sent you an email, I would sign it with my private key. You could verify that it was an email from me with my public key, but you could not use that public key to create an email that looked like it came from me. And so we could have very good identification of where did the email come from. When I got that stupid email from Concur about my needing to do some bill thing, I'd be like, that's not Concur.
And look, that's where I'm a big fan of 1Password. I think 1Password has done amazing things for personal password management and passkeys and whatever, but I think it's based on a hardware key.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? The onboarding that and getting it onto a new device is tied to a physical hardware thing that you can't doctor.
Yeah, which
right?
and that's a good security mechanism. And by the way you use 1Password the correct way actually is to have totally different passwords for every single thing in the world. Right? Uh-huh. So if one's compromised, the blast rate.
And I wish they could just rotate all the passwords every day.
So I think this is why also public key cryptography becomes difficult, right? Because it's like you have to assume eventually your private key gets compromised. How do you rotate all of the public keys?
Yeah.
And so I think but I do actually think that's. Signature verification is a sound way to prove things. That one I believe in.
Yeah. So I believe that's where the world has to go.
Yeah.
Right. Instead of trying to detect dirty, that's a losing proposition.
Yeah.
Trying to assume that this won't happen or barrier things. I'm like, yeah, we're humans. There's going to be weaknesses. Someone's going to get taken in phishing in a large enough organization.
Yeah.
Right. So I think you have to move to knowing what is clean. I think that is clean signatures, not dirty signatures.
Yeah, I think the other thing I think it's plausible. Whether we'll get there, it's debatable.
Yeah, making it easy is hard.
Making it easy is hard. I think the other thing we have to assume is you're just going to get owned, right? I mean, it's about recovery. So I actually think it's less important to try to avoid the attack or whatever. It's just knowing that it's going to happen. When it does happen, what do I do about it? Do I have data that I can recover from? If my data is exfiltrated, did I make sure I didn't put super sensitive data in there, right? I was really careful about that.
Yeah, no, look, I believe in the biggest problem at scale is cataloging. What is all my data?
Yep.
Right? 2, the attacks are getting slow. So people think, oh, I'll just maintain 1 year of like vaulted things and then age it out. So someone will wait 18 months to attack you. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So like you, one, have to catalog and annotate your data. You need to know. Two, when you get owned, like how do you find the last known good copy? Because you typically don't know immediately when you get owned. The signal's not immediate. It's like you got to walk back to figure out when your last good copy was, right? And then the recovery portion, right? I just think about this in my personal life. I've passed the liability to the banks. I was like, they got my credit card. All right, fraud claim. Like, you know what I mean? Yeah. They'll eventually put the money back in my bank account, right? So you just assume every once in a while someone's going to get your credit card and misuse it, right? Like I think probably most people on this call have had that happen to them once.
Exactly.
Right? So we've passed the liability to more secure institutions that can kind of do that, right? And hopefully they remain secure institutions. That's kind of one way of doing it, right? I agree email signing didn't work. So, you know.
That would have been so cool, though. You would know, like, phishing wouldn't exist. But anyway.
So look, making it easy. There's always a trade-off. Like, you know, this. I think we all always like to say Zscaler's our most hated product, right? Why? Because, you know, most people implement it by saying deny all and then like going ahead and saying go open each thing one by one.
Yep.
Right? That is, I guess, an approach to tell me one by one what's clean, but it's back in the email signing days of like, hey, deny all and high barrier to entry to access productivity.
Yeah, exactly.
So, I don't know. This is a hard one, right?
I'm totally pessimistic on there being actually an answer to this. I think this is just a great example of it's just a escalation game. Like someone's going to come up with an attack, someone's going to come up with a response, someone's going to attack, come up with a response, and this will just go on forever.
And I'm not that way, right? Like I have to, like on this, I'm an optimist that like they solved noise canceling on audio. We got to solve this. Like we need smart technologists and people who can like do something that's like, this is clean and I can verify it and sign it and guarantee it, right? With low friction, like that makes it mass adopted and, you know, we can eliminate this for good.
When that happens, hopefully they can also figure out how to get rid of like misinformation. Like they figure it's like kind of in this.
Well, I actually, so that I'm pessimistic. I'm like, we're not going to solve the misinformation because you have to assume everyone has good intent.
Yeah, fair.
Right? Like, so we're humans. There's always going to be cohorts of population with bad intent and cohorts of population with good intent. So I don't know. I think that's where we're at. But like, any last words? No. What's the summary for the technicians out there? Like, you know, you're giving advice to CISOs and you're giving advice to engineers. What do you tell them?
Actually, my advice would be, don't be a CISO. Like, I don't even know, like, just, I feel like that's a job you have until you don't have it. So, I mean, I don't know, pick a different career. Like,
I'm going to tell Kavita you said that. She's our, you know, product security person.
Exactly. So, yeah, no, I think it's a losing battle. Like, I think, if there was money to be made in the attack world, that's where I would go. But yeah, like there's not.
All right. Well, I think that's it. Naveen the pessimist saying, don't be a CISO. All right. Thanks.
Thanks.